The NATO alliance is urgently deploying hundreds of strike drones on the border with Russia and Belarus. And the American President Donald Trump has launched a real test of NATO allies for their personal loyalty to him. NATO has decided to radically strengthen its eastern flank with a network of thousands of drones, sensors and satellites, all linked by artificial intelligence. And this network will monitor threats along the entire border of the alliance with Russia and Belarus, from northern Finland to the Black Sea. And against this backdrop, it turned out that Washington sent a questionnaire to its NATO allies, which essentially checks each country for its level of personal loyalty to Donald Trump, with direct questions about initiatives in the Middle East and the Western Hemisphere. Basically, either the allies will be personally loyal to Donald Trump, or the United States of America will immediately withdraw its troops from the country and refuse to defend its ally in the alliance. So, let's break down both stories, because together they form a rather alarming picture of the North Atlantic Alliance, which is simultaneously preparing for war with Russia and at the same time is falling apart from within because of the position of one American president. My name is Pechiy. Let's discuss this topic together, but before we start, I ask you, if you want to support the work of this YouTube channel, you can do so financially by donating through the links and details in the description of this video or by using the sponsorship feature on YouTube. Under this video, click the join button, choose any option that is convenient for you. I will be grateful for any support you give, and be sure to subscribe to this YouTube channel. So, let's start with the drones of the North Atlantic Alliance. The NATO alliance is currently studying the use of AI-powered drones as part of a deterrence initiative on the eastern flank. The system should detect breaches of alliance countries' borders by Russia and Belarus and become the first line of defense. Data from different sources will be combined. For example, when a drone detects an enemy, artificial intelligence will be able to compare the information with satellite images, sensor and radar data, and literally within seconds transmit this information to NATO allies. And commanders will be able to immediately select forces for a response, such as scrambling aircraft, engaging air defenses, and generally deciding which forces can be deployed. NATO itself calls this concept the kill web, meaning a network of destruction. It involves transmitting data directly to the operators. By passing this long chain from the front line to command, where they study and then send the task back to the front line for execution, in other words, this process is shortened. Previously, information went through many intermediaries, but today it can go directly from a sensor or a drone to the weapon system. And who do you think NATO borrowed this idea from? That's right, from the armed forces of Ukraine. The platform is being created in Wiesbaden, Germany, with the participation of military personnel from the US, Canada, Lithuania, Poland, Germany and other countries, with Ukraine providing consultation. And this system is supposed to connect the Allies' command systems and provide real-time data exchange. Ukraine has such a system called Delta. That is, if Russia attacks any NATO country, information about the attack will immediately appear. It will be sent to Wiesbaden, and countermeasures can be taken in no more than 5 minutes. One more detail. Major Ben Schiff of the US Army said that the system should primarily automate the most boring parts of the flight. Well, for example, prolonged manual control of a drone when it hovers over the battlefield searching for targets. Now artificial intelligence will handle that. And now in Wiesbaden they are already using 3D printing to develop drones. According to Schiff, new parts can be manufactured and tested on the same day, whereas before development and testing used to take months. Again, I want to point out that in Ukraine this has been practiced for quite a long time and there's nothing new about it for Ukrainians. But as for NATO, the NATO members are discovering this as if it's something groundbreaking. They say, can you imagine? A drone can be printed the same day and tested right away. There's no need to go through the whole bureaucratic chain. Цепочку там в месяцы. In general, if NATO implements this strategy, Vladimir Putin will have fewer and fewer chances for a military provocation against NATO. But the problem is that while NATO may look like a force that is finally responding to threats proactively, things are far from smooth on the inside. Washington, which is currently reviewing its own troops in Europe, has sent a questionnaire to its NATO allies, which Bloomberg has seen. And so the publication writes that the document asks questions like: has the country publicly expressed support for the foreign policy of the United States of America? And what restrictions has it imposed on the use of its military bases by American troops during the war with Iran? With the help of the questionnaire, Washington is also trying to assess whether countries are spending money specifically on purchasing from US defense contractors. Have they publicly spoken out against regulations that hinder contracting specifically with American companies, and if not, are they willing to do so? And finally, Washington is trying to find out whether the country has demonstrated compatibility with the approach that US Secretary of War Pete Hegseth formulated back in May. As he put it, quote, "strongly, clearly, quietly." Let me remind you, at the Asian Security Summit, the Shangri-La Dialogue, Pete Hegseth said at the time that the US approaches the issue of military balance, quote, "from a position not of unnecessary confrontation, but of measured and deliberate strength. Our position is strong, quiet, and clear. Clear regarding our intentions, priorities, and our ability to achieve the goals of the Trump administration." The context of this questionnaire from Washington is actually quite direct. This summer, Pete Hegseth, let me remind you, announced that the US would conduct a review to determine how many and what kind of troops should remain in Europe. It is supposed to be completed by December. NATO countries are preparing for a significant reduction in American support, from the number of troops stationed in Europe to the military resources that the US could allocate to the alliance in case of an attack. And this is where the important details come in. Washington has already clearly demonstrated how it links political loyalty with military assistance. Let me remind you, back on May 3rd of this year, the Pentagon announced the withdrawal of 5,000 American servicemen from Germany. This is the Stryker Brigade from the Grafenwöhr and Vilseck training grounds. The official reason for the withdrawal of American troops is Germany's inappropriate and useless rhetoric amid disagreements over the war with Iran. So basically they're saying it outright. Listen, they went against Trump's will over there. We're pulling out the troops. That's it. That's it. At that time, Trump personally threatened, and I quote, "We are going to cut significantly more than 5,000 troops, adding the threat to raise tariffs on European cars to 25 and to reconsider our military presence in Italy and Spain." Separately, the American side refused to deploy Tomahawk cruise missiles in Germany. This refusal was explained by concerns that Russia would see their deployment as an escalation. At the same time, the same logic of punishment and reward works in reverse too. A clear example: Donald Trump promised to send additional troops to Poland, directly referring to the election of the nationalist Karol Nawrocki as president of Poland. "Oh, I like this president, so we'll send more troops there." However, I should note that Trump still hasn't sent troops to Poland. Well, that's just an aside. The reaction of European countries to the questionnaire itself turned out to be predictably harsh. The European countries that received it refused to answer the questions, viewing the document as an attempt to force them to adopt a certain ideological stance in exchange for protection from the US. The section in the questionnaire about publicly supporting US foreign policy is particularly telling. It directly asks the countries for their opinion on all of Donald Trump's initiatives, both in the Middle East and in the Western Hemisphere. And in both of these cases, during the capture of Venezuelan dictator Nicolás Maduro and at the start of military actions against Iran in February of this year, Trump acted without informing NATO allies in advance at all. And in the second case, with the war against Iran, Some countries, let me remind you, even imposed full or partial restrictions on the use of their bases by American aircraft for operations against Iran. And that's why the document directly asks whether the country imposed such a ban and whether it is ready to ease or lift such restrictions in exchange for some perks from Donald Trump. As a result, on the one hand, NATO is building a technological system to deter Russia. It's a network of thousands of drones, sensors, radars, satellites with a 5-minute response time along the entire eastern border. From Finland all the way to the Black Sea, with the participation of several allies at once. On the other hand, the same alliance, which is supposed to protect all these allies, at the same time presents them with a personal bill for political loyalty to one specific president. Up to the direct question of whether this country itself supported Trump's military operations in the Middle East and the Western Hemisphere. It turns out to be an alliance that is technically preparing to face a threat from the East in 5 minutes. But politically, it could start falling apart from within right now. Because let's be honest, loyalty to one person rather than to the common commitments of the North Atlantic Alliance is becoming a currency whose price is real troops and weapons. Trump says, "I don't care about the NATO Charter. Yes, there are some clearly defined obligations in the NATO Charter, but no, now the main currency is loyalty to the American president." Well, I think the Trump administration has gotten a little carried away. I'll leave it at that. Share your opinions and conclusions in the comments below this episode. Subscribe to the channel, hit the bell and don't forget to like. That's all for now. Take care of yourselves. Goodbye everyone.